Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Regulated Liability Network US Proof of Concept webcast. Earlier this morning, members of the US financial services sector published the finding of a POC that explored the feasibility of a regulated liability network, also referred to as RLN, which is envisioned as an interoperable network for all settled payments operating a multi-shared, multi-entity distributed ledger. During this webcast, we will cover a broader set of concepts, including what is RLN, dive into the RLN POC, and discuss the findings. Gifty, can you take us to the next slide, please? My name is Roy Ben-Hur from Deloitte, and I will be the moderator of this webcast. And I'm honored to host members of the RLN US POC to discuss the RLN journey and key findings. Next slide, please. I want to introduce our speakers today. Raj Demordarian from MasterCard, Tony McLaughlin from Citi, Rebecca Simmons from Sullivan & Cromwell, and Per van Zelkovitz from the New York Innovation Center at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Tony, can I start with you and ask you to provide an overview to the group about the RLN concept? Next slide, please.
Absolutely. Thank you, Roy, and welcome everyone to this webinar. My name is Tony McLaughlin from Citi Transaction Banking, and I will give you an overview of the RLN concept. So the Regulated Liability Network concept is an idea for a new type of payment system that is inspired by shared ledger technology. The traditional world of payments is made up of messages that flow between regulated banks, and the central bank provides settlement services. Each of these separate institutions operates their own data centers containing their books and records. When blockchain technology was developed, a different paradigm presented itself. Rather than messaging between separate islands of data, blockchains indicated the possibility to build networks that contained actual value in the shared ledgers. Now, in constructing the RLN concept, we first had to discard several blockchain features that do not readily apply to regulated financial services. And these features that we did not incorporate are trustlessness, anonymity, tokenomics, proof of work, unregulated instruments, non-sovereign units of account, and commodity forms of money. When these features are put aside, we're still left with intriguing attributes of blockchains that might be used to upgrade regulated financial services. And these intriguing aspects are 24/7 operation, multi-asset representation and settlement, shared cryptographic status, and programmability. So RLN imagines a new regulated payment system with a defined rulebook that runs a shared ledger. And on this shared ledger are representations of central bank money, commercial bank money, and potentially other existing regulated financial instruments. The money, the value is in the network and not at the edges. Through this design, we examine the potential benefits of what might be called the tokenization thesis. And this is the idea that orchestration and settlement between regulated firms might be more efficiently conducted on shared ledgers. The thesis is that the shared ledger alternative to the existing messaging paradigm might be a new platform for responsible innovation. And with that overview, let me pass back to Roy.
Thank you, Tony. The US POC was built on the RLN concept. During the next slide, we will deep dive into the concept itself. Per, may I ask you to provide an overview of the US POC and US use cases?
Of course, thank you, Roy, and thank you, Tony, for the overview of the RLN concept. And it's a pleasure to be with you all here today. My name is Per von Zelowitz, the director of the New York Innovation Center. And today I'll provide an overview of this research effort to explore the feasibility of the RLN concept. So what was the RLN US proof of concept? So to test the RLN concept, members of the regulated US financial sector came together to conduct a 12-week proof of concept to evaluate the business applicability, technical feasibility, and legal viability of the RLN concept. The effort was spearheaded by a collaborative working group with members representing each of the participating institutions. The research project was conducted in a test environment and used only simulated data. No real value transactions took place, and all simulated liabilities were denominated in US dollars. So no real money was moved on the RLN POC. The participants involved both public and private organizations. The research was led by the collaborative working group of 14 institutions from across the private and public financial sectors. You can see the participating firms listed on the right-hand side of the screen. As Roy mentioned earlier, I lead the New York Innovation Center at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and we participated in the research study from the perspective of the US Central Bank and as a key payments system operator. That being said, I should also note that this research effort is not intended to advance any specific policy outcomes, nor is it intended to signal that the Federal Reserve will make any imminent decisions about the appropriateness of issuing a central bank digital currency or any other product or service, nor indicate how one would necessarily be designed. But regarding the future of finance and technology, the official sector and the regulated financial sector do share a common interest in aligning financial market infrastructures with the needs of a rapidly digitizing, always-on global economy. And as we all reach the end of this project, the working group concluded that public-private collaboration is a great, productive method to explore potential and practical improvements to the financial system. And we welcome future research collaboration between the two sectors as we all explore the future of money and payments in the digital age. Now, there were two use cases in scope for the proof of concept that we tested. You can see those two use cases on the left-hand side of the screen. Number one, domestic interbank payments. This use case simulated wholesale payments between commercial banks and was intended to prove the core functionality of a theoretical system. Transactions were conducted in commercial bank deposit tokens and settled using a theoretical wholesale central bank digital currency, which was defined as a tokenized record of a central bank deposit liability. The second use case, cross-border payments in US dollars. This use case focused on cross-border US dollar wholesale payments and explored the potential of the concept to enhance the experience of global users of US dollars as an international trade and settlement currency. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Roy.
Thank you, Per. As you can see, the US POC included a number of participants and use cases. But before we progress, Tony, I know there were a number of items that were out of scope during the pilot. Can you indicate what they were?
Absolutely, Roy. In the interest of really bringing a laser-like focus to the application of shared ledger technology to regulated financial services, we had to limit the scope. And in my previous comments, I noted several features of blockchains that we did not think readily applied to regulated financial services. So they did not form a part of our investigations. So we had a limited amount of time and a narrow focus for this proof of concept. So there were several other aspects that were strictly out of scope. And these were, number one, the utilization of public permissionless blockchains. So the working group did not consider this technology to be mature enough at this time to be a fitting candidate for a regulated payment system. Second item out of scope is cryptocurrency. We did not include any non-sovereign, unregulated crypto assets within the network. Next item out of scope was consideration or involvement of stablecoins. And while future regulated stablecoins could well operate within the regulatory perimeter, we excluded them from consideration in the POC at this time. Furthermore, we did not examine retail CBDC. We didn't look at the merits or demerits of retail CBDC and focused exclusively on wholesale banking use cases. Nor did we look into the topic of digital asset regulation. The regulatory framework for crypto assets was out of scope because the focus was solely on existing legal instruments transacted by existing regulated institutions, albeit on a new infrastructure utilizing shared ledger technology. And finally, we didn't look into items like performance. In the technology workstream, we chose to focus exclusively on the functional requirements, how it works, whether it meets the needs of the use cases, and we did not focus on non-functional aspects like transaction throughput, scalability, cyber resilience. So Roy, that's hopefully a clear delineation of what was out of scope, and I'll pass back to you.
Thank you, Tony. It is. As Per mentioned, the working group explored the business applicability, technical feasibility, and legal viability of the regulated liability network and the underlying concept. Moving forward, we will discuss the findings that came from each of these areas, starting with the business applicability. Tony, can I hand this back to you and discuss the business applicability?
Absolutely, Roy. Now we're into the main event, which is to discuss the findings. And in the business workstream, we sought to identify material delta benefits that might arise from the application of shared ledger technology to the regulated financial system. We started with the thesis of a better settlement mechanism being available that would complement rather than replace existing secure messaging solutions. Financial messages today between market participants already take place at near the speed of light, and formats like ISO 20022 can carry very large data payloads. The working group felt that the greatest benefit could be derived from the closer coordination of settlements with the payment messages. We first applied this thinking to domestic payments in the US, but to be honest with you, this was more of a sanity check on the design to see whether it could fulfill its role as a payment system and perform basic payment operations. This objective was achieved, and we satisfied ourselves that RLN is a viable payment system design. But by far the greatest focus was placed upon cross-border payments in US dollars. And this is where we saw the potential of the RLN design to deliver the greatest benefits. Now, to make this use case concrete and clear, think about a company in Germany buying an industrial robot from a manufacturer in Japan and settling that transaction in the US dollar. So many commercial entities outside of the US trust the US dollar for international settlements and remittances. The current service level is good and has been improved recently through innovations like Swift GPI, which brings end-to-end payment tracking and tracing. Payments in US dollars can reach the beneficiary in short times, even cross-border, often within the hour. But there is still variation in the service levels and gaps in the service window. For example, the recent 4th of July holiday is a working day in most parts of the world, and people still want to make payments on US bank holidays, on weekends, and during the Asia Pacific working day. So the exciting news is that RLN was demonstrated as a potential design for a global instant dollar payment system. The ability to move dollars in any amount on a 24/7 basis would be a game changer for global users of the dollar, augmenting the preferred international currency in full compliance with all rules and regulations, with no corners cut with respect to know your customer, anti-money laundering, and sanctions. In context, payments within the continental United States are becoming 24/7 and instant. And the logical next step is to extend those benefits overseas and to make sure that it is the dollar that remains the international currency of choice for the digital age. Now, the POC did not conclude that RLN is the only path to building such a system, but it was through this public-private partnership that we demonstrated the possibility to construct a compliant global instant dollar payment system. And with that, I'll hand back to you, Roy.
Thank you, Tony. Those were very interesting findings out of the business report. The POC also demonstrated a number of potential technical RLN features. Raj, can I ask you to please take over and cover the technical feasibilities findings?
Yeah, absolutely, Roy. Thanks for having me here, Tony, and Per. A great commentary on the findings on the business section as well as the participation. At MasterCard, we've always collaborated with the industry in building multiple trusted rails for payment and financial applications. So very glad to be participating in this POC along with the rest of the industry as well as the public sector. In this case, New York Fed Innovation Center. My name is Raj Thamotharan. I help run this space for MasterCard. What I want to talk about in the next few minutes is the functional capabilities that Tony and Per referred to in the discussions. What did we achieve in the POC and what it sets up to build in the future? There are 5 critical functional capabilities that we demonstrated. The first one is availability. And Tony gave a great example in the use case in the payment between 2 countries, doing them when over the weekend and when one of the country's systems may not be available. So this new POC had to demonstrate 24/7, including the weekend, availability of the system. That is critical for having a global payment infrastructure. The second is efficient settlement. You need to be able to deliver near real-time ability to settle multiple instruments in real time. That is essential to complete the trade and provide the finality of settlement. And in this case, it was using the central bank money that the finality was achieved. And it's the combination of the commercial bank money as well as the central bank money working in cohesion to provide this near real-time settlement finality. The third thing that is quite important in this is interoperability. We live in a world of multiple networks, and that's not going to change tomorrow if we have to have this infrastructure set up. So therefore, interoperability using industry standards, including ISO 222, is important. That kind of connectivity is important for, in some cases, last mile, in some cases, providing seamless transition between existing systems and new systems. So we demonstrated that the setup that we have in the POC can start to provide that kind of connectivity to back office systems and traditional payment rails. The third one is privacy. Privacy is very important if it need to power global commerce. You can't have public transactions. You know, sometimes people may say that, oh, it is a shared ledger, and how are you having private transactions? The technologies are available to actually have point-to-point private transactions between two parties that are not seen by others. So it was important for us to demonstrate this functionality as well. Finally, all of these functional capabilities cannot be brought to life in the form of applications if you can't program against them. It is simply being able to assemble these capabilities in the form of smart contracts to automate complex workflows and also deliver atomic settlement in terms of delivering either the one currency versus the other or delivering an asset and so forth. That programmability demonstration is critical for further use of the system as well. Each of these key attributes was addressed successfully in the POC environment. And I welcome people to take a look at the technical feasibility report alongside the business findings as well, in order to fully see the power of what was demonstrated. In order to explore the technology, we worked with two technology providers, Settle and Digital Assets. But it's important to note that none of the approaches that are taken are a specific technology stack dependent. The focus is to demonstrate the capabilities that can be used, delivered through a digital shared ledger technology. And there are multiple options possible. And I fully expect, and many people in the industry fully expect, that there would be multitude of technologies to power this eventual implementation. In summary, the technical workstream concluded that a shared ledger is a valid candidate technology for implementation. It could really power the next cycle of innovation in the financial sector. And in fact, it is necessary in many of the use cases to fully reach the availability, effective settlement with interoperability and privacy. And that sets the basis for people developing new kinds of applications on it. So great to be partnering with the rest of the industry to be doing this, and look forward to continue to work with industry and the public sector to move this forward. With that, let me hand it back to you, Ben.
Thank you, Raj. As you said, a lot to unpack in the technical report, and clearly, Tony, with the business report that you have alluded to, and they are both available for review on the website. The last pillar was the legal report. So with that, Rebecca, your team is the one who conducted the legal viability study. Can you highlight what were the key findings that you went through when you developed the work?
Sure. Thank you very much, Roy. And thank you, Raj, and all of you for providing that background. It's been a pleasure for us to work with you all as well on this. Obviously, at the proof of concept stage, we're not really in a position, and it's not been our role, to provide legal opinions as to whether the proposal actually works or to come to firm legal conclusions. But what we were looking at was whether a system with the desired characteristics could work. We were asked to examine that question in several critical areas. Among the questions were, is there a suitable regulatory framework to govern an RLN? Is there a legal basis for payments made through an RLN to become final and irrevocable? And can we establish the point of settlement finality at the right point in the settlement process? And would the use of a distributed ledger-based RLN affect the legal nature of the deposits held by customers for use in settling payments using the system? And we were able to conclude that each of these questions and the others that we looked into can be answered in a manner that would support the development of such a system. The Financial Market Utility Regulatory Framework established by the Dodd-Frank Act provides a natural framework for the regulation of the operator of an RLN, allowing full federal oversight of the system's operation. If that framework is not available before the system becomes systemically important, then state and federal money services regulation frameworks would also be available. In terms of settlement finality, the system could rely upon the well-tested framework of Article 4A of the Uniform Commercial Code to achieve settlement finality. And the use of distributed ledger technology, as opposed to existing technologies, to record the ownership and transfer of deposits should not change the legal nature of the deposits and should be able to satisfy existing legal requirements and regulatory requirements. Of course, regulatory input would be needed if an RLN is developed. In particular, input from the FDIC will be needed to ensure that the use of the proposed system remains consistent with the FDIC's requirements and needs as the provider of federal deposit insurance. However, we were able to conclude that there are no evident insuperable roadblocks to further development of an RLN as contemplated in the proof of concept. So with that, let me pass this back to you, Roy, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Rebecca. The RLN POC was conducted, as mentioned earlier, as a public-private collaboration that explored the interaction of shared ledger technology and the regulated financial systems. Before we conclude, I have a couple of questions to our speakers. So can you take us to the next slide, Gifty? Thank you. And the first question is to you, Tony. From a perspective of the international bank, what excited you about the POC and what new insights did you generate out of it? You're muted, Tony.
Roy, the opportunity to work around the table with industry peers and the public sector was absolutely invaluable. We're faced with a new technology paradigm that might upgrade the financial system. Now, we can have the central bank come up with its own diagnosis and prognosis, and individual banks can pursue their own proprietary efforts. But how much better is it to gather together the regulated financial industry together with the central bank to address a common question? How can we collectively upgrade the dollar-based settlement infrastructure? I think in this POC, we have proven that the answers reached through this kind of process are much better than we could ever have come up with on an individual basis. Now, in terms of specific insights, I think in this process, because of the very defined focus area, what's in scope and what's out scope, we've taken a microscope to the tokenization thesis. And I think we're getting closer to identifying its true potential value. So for me, the missing layer of the financial system is a more powerful way to achieve settlements between institutions using existing legal instruments. And I'm absolutely intrigued by the potential to create multi-asset settlement venues that go beyond today's special purpose silos. I think that the industry could benefit from a utility that would enable the participants in a financial transaction to establish unambiguous shared understanding of state, of transaction state, through cryptographic means. And what's clear to me is that nature abhors a vacuum, and the regulated financial system must step up and use the latest technology to meet all valid payment needs in the global digital economy. Back to you, Roy.
Thank you, Tony. Per, if I flip it over to get your thoughts, why is this research of interest to the New York Innovation Center, and what did you learn?
Thank you, Roy. This proof of concept for the New York Innovation Center was part of broader New York Innovation Center technical research regarding the future of money and financial market infrastructures. As a group within the New York Fed, one of the main goals of our research is to inform stakeholders, including the public, about potential applications of new financial technologies in central banking. The RLN POC was complementary to other projects in our portfolio focused on wholesale cross-border payments using regulated wholesale digital assets. More specifically, there was a real area of interest for us in understanding the implications to operations for a central bank in a world where there's a theoretical financial market infrastructure that includes regulated tokenized commercial bank deposits and tokenized central bank money on a single ledger. So that's an area of real interest for us to explore. Thank you, Roy.
Thank you, Per. So if I ask you to put your payments hat on, Raj, how would the POC findings contribute to the global dialogue on the future of digital money?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Roy. And at MasterCard, we believe that digital ledger technology can, over time, provide, similar to like what internet become a utility for moving data, digital ledger technology, when designed right, can become a utility for storing and moving value and to be programmed on. We sincerely believe that. So to us, the POC findings that demonstrated that when a regulated money, such as the bank deposits and the wholesale CBDCs, delivers a full 24/7 availability, programmability, and all the critical building blocks that we talked about and demonstrated in this, can begin to deliver that kind of functionality. So once that's possible, when you add that with a very clear trust framework based on identity of people, businesses, as well as an overall set of rules that everyone can follow, can really power the next cycle of innovation in this financial space. So for us, this is a critical, the set of POC findings that establish business viability, technical viability, legal viability is really, I think, useful for the industry as well as us to build on and provide usable solutions and infrastructure that I'm sure many of these parties will continue to work on. So it's truly exciting to be part of that and establish that baseline, if you will, through a public-private collaboration such as this.
Thank you, Raj. So Rebecca, I know you've conducted a very thorough legal analysis, but from a legal perspective, were there any surprising takeaways that you have encountered during the analysis?
Thanks. Yeah, it was a very interesting project, and it's always a pleasure to be part of these new ideas. So in that sense, no surprise there. But there were two things about it that we found a little bit surprising. The first one was the extent to which existing legal frameworks accommodate this proposed approach to settling US dollar payments, despite its use of these new technologies and concepts. Article 4A in the Dodd-Frank Act, among other frameworks, apply very well to this interesting new approach. I think that's by design, but it is good to see that it actually does accommodate these new ideas. The second surprise was the ways in which the approach, which involves the simultaneous completion of all the steps in a single payment rather than sequential completion of those steps, might simplify or enhance compliance with other regulatory requirements, such as AML and sanctions requirements. Of course, we will have to discuss those conclusions with the relevant regulators in order to confirm that they agree with the way we are looking at it, but some very interesting opportunities for addressing those concerns were identified in the course of our discussions.
Thank you, Rebecca. And I guess this is a final question, but and I'll start with you, Tony. So, Tony, what are the next set of interesting research questions that are posed by the RLN concept? And more broadly, what are the next steps for the group?
So, Roy, there are several further interesting research questions that would be interesting to explore. The first one is the possibility of creating a multi-asset version of the regulated liability network that includes securities as well as central bank money and commercial bank money on the same platform. Such a system could enable more efficient liquidity operations, vital liquidity operations, like repurchase agreements on an intraday basis. So the first chunk of interesting research would be about a multi-asset regulated liability network. The second interesting direction to explore would be a multi-currency regulated liability network that could provide some of the answers to questions posed by the G20 on their work on cross-border payments. You know, there is a missing layer in global payments. We don't have a multi-currency equivalent to Fedwire or CHIPS. These are single currency systems. There is no such thing at the moment as a multi-currency real-time gross settlement service that can generally be used to facilitate settlements in multiple currencies. So the creation of a new international settlement network might help reduce this gradient between domestic and international payment service levels. And my final point would be the prospect of the global instant dollar is so intriguing. It would be so valuable for global users that deserves further serious study, not just in terms of research, but looking for ways to bring that into actuality. But I have to emphasize that at this stage, we're satisfied with the contribution that we're making to the global debate on digital currency and the future of digital money. And the group has not at this stage determined its next steps. So we submit this work for consideration by the domestic and global community, and we will announce any future steps if they occur in due course.
Thank you, Tony. Per, if you put the New York Innovation Center view on, what will be your perspective if I follow through with a similar question?
Thank you, Roy. So as Tony mentioned, the working group, including the New York Innovation Center, has not formally committed to any future phases of work or next steps. But personally speaking, there are a few areas of real interest to us. I think smart contracts, interoperability, and atomic settlement are all intriguing areas for future research. This combination of capabilities may offer counterparties a level of efficiency, safety, and security via programming and testing those features further under increasingly complex scenarios. It would be a rather insightful exercise to test possible capabilities of such a system. Again, though, we have not committed to any future phases at this time and are open to exploring different use cases, alternative models, and technologies that could offer similar improvements for wholesale payments and settlements.
Thank you, Per. The US RLN POC work has been a contribution to the national and global body of knowledge related to the future of digital money, while supporting the deliberations about the best way to modernize money in the digital age. Additionally, the POC outcomes also identified areas for future research. I want to recognize members of the participating members who took part in this POC and their tireless efforts and partnership. I also want to thank our speakers today, Tony, Rebecca, Per, and Raj, for their very insightful discussion, and thank you for joining today's event. I hope you find this webcast helpful, and I encourage you to share information on the RLN US POC with your peers and through your social media network. A recording of this webcast will be posted to the RLN USPOC.org, as indicated at the bottom of the slide, for continued learning in 24 to 48 hours. Additionally, you can find the reports and other information available for your access at the RLN USPOC.org website. I want to thank you all for your participation today, and this concludes our webcast.